Ultima the Black Gate is a port of the legendary Ultima 7, considered by PC nerds to be one of, if not the greatest RPG ever made. Its Super Nintendo incarnation, however, is mostly unknown and generally disliked by those who have heard of it. Spoony tore it to shreds, Hardcore Gaming 101 trashed it, and I think it's aggressively okay. Keep in mind, I am not a PC gamer, I've never played the real Ultima 7, and its association with that certainly only serves to hurt this title's reputation. But if you view this as a standalone experience, it's sort of like a mixture of the Super Nintendo versions of both Ultima 6 and Runes of Virtue 2. You have the same open expanse, forking dialogue, non-linear progression with an emphasis on world and character building that you had in 6, combined with the simplified equip a weapon to each hand, button mashing combat, dungeon crawling action of Runes of Virtue 2. Ultima 7 is a murder mystery, except they're kidnappings, not murders. Except in the PC original, they are murders. And it's also a religion is bad kind of game. The classic RPG trope. The only organized religion in the world is a front to summon this extra-dimensional being hell-bent on conquering all life. You arrive in Britannia, which works on Chronicles of Narnia rules. It's a separate dimension from our own, where time passes at an inconsistent rate. Our protagonist lives here on Earth, the same one as you or me, but whenever Britannia is in peril, when they truly need a hero, it manifests a way for us to travel to their world and save the day. This time when we arrive in Britannia, everything seems fine on the surface. It has been 200 years since the events of Ultima 6, and meanwhile there have been no wars, gargoyles and humans have integrated their societies, Britannia has never been more united, or more prosperous for that matter. But underneath the surface, moon gates, those blue teleportation portals, they're not working. Magic isn't as powerful as it once was, and the 8 virtues which have guided them into this prosperity have all but faded into obscurity. Instead, Britannia's moral compass was replaced by the Fellowship, an omnipresent organization built around providing charity and helping the disenfranchised peoples of Britannia. They seem nice. Anyone you interact with is nice on the surface, but this gigantic, obviously evil red face, which calls itself the Guardian, the god that they're worshipping, that can telepathically communicate with you and seemingly anyone who pledged allegiance to the Fellowship, he's certainly not nice. And the more you pry into this chest, the worse the Fellowship seems. They're nasty to anyone who states anything critical of them. They even attempt to trap and kill you on a couple of occasions, with you having no choice but to turn the other cheek because, after all, you're the Avatar, and you want to find out exactly what they're up to. The story never really goes much of anywhere from here. You find out that the Fellowship is building a portal to summon that evil red face. Then you beat up a bunch of them in this nondescript room in a cave, destroy the Black Gate, you know, the one from the title. And this red face might be my favorite part of the entire game. It interrupts you with snide remarks, puns, telling you not to go that way when you're getting close to something plot relevant. You don't expect there to be like Gex energy sass in your Ultima game, but here it is, and in the PC version he's fully voiced too.
For I shall be your companion, your provider, and your master.
Which is amazing. But 6's plotline wasn't anything spectacular either, though it made up for it with these incredibly robust NPCs making up its world. That was the #1 detail that impressed me when I played through Ultima 6. You could walk up to anybody, speak to them, and learn about their relationships, job description, town history, personal life stories. There was this branching conversation system, and on the Super Nintendo anyway, I haven't seen anything else like it. 7 brings this conversation system back, though you might not realize it just looking at footage. Crime long guardian again, bye. It looks like random word salad. Fellowship de prey, Chamino, pause, guardian again, bye. It's like you're just kind of stringing words together on first glance, but no, there's selectable options. And I welcome that conversations are here at all, but it's disappointing that they're noticeably much less complex than they were in 6. You can ask everyone and anyone about the Fellowship, but other than that, unless you're speaking to someone related to the main quest, you're not going to get much more than that out of them. I was disappointed that Lord British never gains any additional dialogue after you first speak to him. I mean, this is Lord British. If anyone you'd expect to get a lot of dialogue out of, it would be him. I found a pretty obvious hit list in the basement of the notorious Captain Hook. Yes, really, Captain Hook. A list of names with known kidnapped or murdered, whatever, people on it with an X next to them. Then you have Lord British, and the Avatar is the last two names on the list, and they're not checked off yet. So I brought him the list, and he didn't really seem to care. He had no additional dialogue, didn't acknowledge that any time had passed, didn't acknowledge your list. He just said the same old shit he said at the beginning of the game. 6's 24-hour clock returns as well, but again, much like the dialogue, it isn't used to nearly the same extent. The most obvious change is that when it's nighttime, you now can't see anything. You need to either sleep or cast illumination or carry a torch. But there aren't any puzzles revolving around time. In fact, I only recall 2 moments in the entire game where time was a factor at all. You need to talk to this spirit, or a wisp as the game dubs him, at a specific moment, and the fortune teller will only read your fortune first thing in the morning. Any later and she just tells you to come back when you have more time. Sometimes characters will appear in different locations at separate times, but unlike in 6, it didn't appear to affect any dialogue. Characters say the same things no matter where or when you interact with them here. Though coming up short of the best NPCs outside of Earthbound on the Super Nintendo, is that really something I can judge Ultima the Black Gate too harshly on? Especially since I know that the PC version is without a doubt 100 times more fully fleshed out. Plus, the manual includes an 18-page letter addressing the player directly, written in character by Batlin, the Fellowship's Pope, High Priest, founder, the guy responsible for all this Fellowship nonsense, and de facto antagonist of this story. It's this autobiographical piece about Batlin's life, his philosophy, what caused him to start the Fellowship, an absolute must-read for sure, no matter what edition of Ultima 7 you're going to play, and it elevates him into one of the best villains. He's not dangerous because he's this all-powerful god or something, he's just a regular guy who just so happens to have earned the undying loyalty of half of Britannia. He's dangerous because he believes his own bullshit so wholeheartedly. I love this whole dynamic, but at the same time, I can't help but imagine how much better all this is in the real game, in the PC version of Ultima 7. As it stands, the Super Nintendo edition feels like Runes of Virtue 2 gameplay with a veneer of classic Ultima storytelling thrown on top. Though ironically, even though they share a control scheme, and Runes of Virtue 2 was clearly designed as Baby's first Ultima game, 7 on Super Nintendo is much easier to consume. Its dungeon design is much simpler, and after what Runes of Virtue put me through, I'll welcome simple. Most areas don't even contain multiple floors or areas. They're all standard mazes, like on the back of a cereal box. But that's not going to stop me from complaining about something, and in this case, the key system sucks. And now I don't mean key as in like Dragon Ball key shooting laser beams, or keys like in Zelda, which are bats. I mean literally the keys you use to unlock doors. There are 5 different ways to unlock a door, and what method you need to use is rarely conveyed well. You see this counter in the top right? That's one method. You'll find keys in chests laying on the ground. You'll be drowning in them most of the time. In addition to those, you can also pick up these special keys which take up slots in your inventory. Most of them are basic, brass looking, but there's also a few one-offs and, of course, the skull keys. You use the skull keys on the skull doors, and only the skull doors, but that's the only bit that's self-explanatory at all. You'll pick up 4 identical brass keys, which all unlock different doors. Nothing telegraphs this. All the doors look exactly the same. You just need to trial and error it. Sometimes, though, no matter what key you try and use, the little keys won't work. None of the brass keys you find work. Some doors simply refuse to open. And in those instances, sometimes you need to hit a switch, but that's normally not what happens, and fair enough if that's the case. Most of the time, it's because you need to cast a friggin' spell. So you open up your spell book only to find that there are 2 different unlocking spells. You have Door Unlock or Magic Unlock. They're not interchangeable. Magic Unlock won't work on doors which require Door Unlock and vice versa. Eventually I figured out that Door Unlock just acts as a stand-in for one of these small keys if you happen to run out. But Magic Unlock is the bane of my existence. Multiple times I would get stuck because the game would drain all of my MP because of how many gosh darn doors it expects me to unlock. I'll walk up to a door, use Magic Unlock, it won't open, and I won't know why. Was I standing not close enough to the door? Was I in the wrong spot? It can be weirdly picky sometimes. Did I not find the correct key? Do I need to go back and look for the key? Maybe I should try door unlock now? I don't know. And it's not like magic unlock doors are rare. There's just as many of these as there are any other kind of door, especially late game. In fact, there's probably more of them late game than any other kind. So you know what you do? You find a magic potion, leave the area, come back, and the magic potion will have respawned. It's one of those games that is super short-term memory. If you pick up an item and then leave the area and come back, items always respawn when you do this. So rinse and repeat, make sure you always have 1 or 2 magic potions to get your magic back, or 7, and you're all set. Now to conclude, if this was intended to serve as an advertisement for the real Ultima 7, then mission accomplished, because it's got me interested. But for the purposes of my tier list, I can't go any higher than a meh. It's much more competent than something like Runes of Virtue 2, but it's not even close between this and False Prophet. I had an alright time, but I also can't look you in the eye and say that it's as good as Fire Emblem, or Lufia, or Evo. Meh feels the most correct. There's actually one more Ultima game on Super Nintendo, believe it or not. I had never heard of it, because it was only released in Japan. As of November 2022, there is no fan translation, meaning I can't play it. And that's it for Ultima on the Super Nintendo. One good game, the other 2 not so much, and then a 4th mystery game that I have no way to play. And in case you missed it, this is now a Patreon-supported show. Big shout out to all my patrons, especially to William Robert Lee. God dang, dude. And we're voting on what episode comes next over on Patreon now. What you're seeing on screen are the raw results. But remember, it's weighted voting. $2 tier counts as 1, $5 tier counts as 2. And luckily, Patreon allows me to see exactly who voted for what, which means let's calculate the results. And just like the normal vote, it's a tie between King Arthur and the Knights of Justice and Uncharted Waters New Horizons. And in the event of a tie, we spin a wheel. So there you have it. The next episode will be King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, but I get the sense that Uncharted Waters will have its day soon. Remember, never trust anyone who needs a haircut. Goodbye.